This is the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Welcome into another week of the biggest sports week of the year, you could argue, MLB All-Star Game week. We are going to have some fun because we are going to make some shit up as we go along. But it was a fascinating day of soccer. I know most of you probably didn't appreciate it, but it was a great Sunday of soccer with two finals. The Euros final, which we'll talk about in this show, and I want to start with the Copa America. Now, the big losers in all of this is, by the way, Argentina wins the Copa America back-to-back with a World Cup mixed there in between. One of the great international teams ever now. The great loser of this tournament is America for a couple of different reasons. First off, the overall aesthetic of it. I've mentioned it on this show before. Soccer to me is at its best when I'm watching the English Premier League, where they are playing in old grounds, where the fans are right on top of you. They've got designated sections for the away fans, so they're all in the same place. It makes for a great atmosphere. All of those things which you do not get in American soccer. And to be fair to America, a lot of international tournaments lack that atmosphere because they play them in 70,000 seat football stadiums. You're nowhere near the action. Fans are scattered throughout. There's no, great orange wall like you would see in the Euros. That's not there in the Copa America. It looks dull. They're playing on patched together turf, even in some of the best stadiums in the world. And it just doesn't look like big time soccer. It just doesn't. It's the same problem you have with MLS. Now, MLS, those stadiums are half full, which we saw a lot in the group stages of Copa America, but it doesn't look big time. And as weird as it might sound, I don't think soccer is ever going to look big time in a football stadium, an American football stadium that seats upwards of 70 to 75,000 in each of them. It just doesn't look like soccer to me. So that's your first problem. The second problem, and more obvious, America sucked. America sucked in this tournament. The first hosts ever to go out in the group stages. They got their coach canned, who should have been, was canned last year, should have been double canned last year. And it's like we let this kind of song and dance go on, kidding ourselves that Greg Berhalter was going to be the answer to all our prayers. And now, 2 years away from the biggest World Cup they've ever played in, they're like, oh, you know what? We should find ourselves a coach. Yeah, you should have 3-4 years ago. You should have last year. And instead, you wait for 2 years before the World Cup after this great international embarrassment of not getting out of the group stages. The U.S. is moving backwards. It was such good momentum that the U.S. had 10 years ago or so. That 2014 World Cup where they made it out of the groups for the second time running. And had these great storylines. You had the John Brooks header. You had the great game against Portugal. You had Tim Howard, all those saves against Belgium. You lost the game, but you had some good momentum. The MLS got better after that, and then you failed to qualify for the World Cup in 2018, and truly it hasn't been on a great plane since. I know you added, Atlanta gave you this great atmosphere once again in a domed football stadium. But really, it hasn't gone the way you would have hoped, I think, if you're U.S. soccer in the 10 years since. And it's culminating in this great national, international embarrassment on your home soil. So that's the pretty obvious of America cannot compete, still can't compete with the likes of some of these top South American teams, even a Colombia, let alone an Argentina. They can't compete with them. Shit, they can't even compete with Panama. Canada made it to the semis, and you didn't even make it out of the groups? Whew. So that's the obvious embarrassment. And then finally, I'll split the blame here. But that Copa America final on Sunday night should have been an absolute classic. And it was a terrific football match. Argentina pulling out 1-0 in extra time. Great drama. But the real drama came before the game even started and really throughout the first half, and it was not happening on the pitch. It was happening outside. Once again, another major final, another major fuck-up by the governing body. And America's not excluded from this. It was played in Miami, the Hard Rock Stadium, and the match had to be delayed over an hour because they couldn't get fans in the building. This somehow happens every few years with major soccer games, and it doesn't get fixed. And I don't understand why. There is clearly a layout for it to get fixed because it happens with other international tournaments. But they had closed the gates. They were worried about too many people coming in that didn't have tickets. And because of that, it led to these giant crushes in the turnstiles and security not opening the gates even for ticketed fans. They were passing children over the barriers so that they wouldn't be crushed to death. Figure it out, man. It happened at the Champions League final in 2022 to Liverpool and Real Madrid fans. Unfortunately, Liverpool fans know this all too well because it's happened a couple of deadly times in their history, including the Hillsborough disaster in 1989 where 97 people died because there were too many people coming into the ground and security didn't know what the fuck to do. It happens at other international tournaments. You have to have multiple ticketing gates. You have to. Because then what happens is what happened at the Hard Rock Stadium last night where there's just too many people. You don't know what to do, so you keep them out, and then people start to pass out because they're being crushed, and then you have to open the gates for a few minutes just so people won't die and that they can actually get to safety. And blammo, you've got half the people coming in don't have tickets. Then you shut the gates again, and people are literally at the ticketing counter showing them their phones with their Ticketmaster app open because they paid a couple $100 to get in this building and you won't let them in. The game is going on and they're not being let in the building. People are Shawshanking it, running through the vents at Hard Rock Stadium just to get into a building, into a sporting event that they paid to get into. Figure it out. Like, I can't even go to an NFL game today without going through at least two checkpoints to make sure that I have tickets and that I can get into this arena. Shit, I can't even go to a Baylor basketball game down the road without going through two ticketing checkpoints. Why is that not happening for the Copa America Final? You should be able to weed out, like, I don't know, half a mile away from the stadium who's actually supposed to be there and who is not. And this happens with soccer. I'm not saying that the fans in general don't have any blame here. There are plenty that came in without any tickets. But we've known it for decades and through other tournaments that this is what happens with soccer fans. It's specifically a thing in South America where people hang around the stadium and hope to get lucky and get into the match. It happens, man. I'm not saying there's no blame there, but how does CONMEBOL not know this? How? And I'm sure it's happened at other games in this tournament. So why in the final is it a complete and utter clusterfuck? That's what I don't understand. And by the way, America, it's coming again in 2026. It's going to be the same layout. You're going to be playing them at these major football stadiums. You already know where they're going to be. And you know that there are going to be people without tickets trying to get into the ground. It happens. Happens all the time. But other tournaments have figured out how to minimize that through proper security. The people in Miami last night, they had no clue what they were doing. And I'm sure it's CONMEBOL that paid them, that contracted them out. But they had no clue. And that falls on us as the host nation, which will happen again in 2026. So FIFA, figure it out. I know you're going to cut as many corners as you possibly can. That's how we got a World Cup in Qatar, okay? But there's such an easy fix to this. Just a couple more bucks. 1 or 2 more security checkpoints. Trust me, man. There are international soccer stadiums, I've been to them, that you can't even get within like 5 or 6 blocks of the place if you don't have a ticket. That seems to work like a charm. So, FIFA 2026, figure this out. Figure this out, man. You know, let's leave the ridiculousness of South Americans to on the pitch when they're all crowding around the referee or writhing in pain on the floor. By the way, I've never been to South America. They're obviously great soccer fans and have a great soccer tradition. But I'm starting to wonder in these domestic leagues, like, are they allowed to murder the refs? Because it seems to get very close to that in these international tournaments, you know, to the point where I'm like, they're very relaxed with this. Maybe they are allowed to just kill them, like on the pitch. I don't know. I've never been to a game in Brazil or Argentina or Colombia or anything like that. So anyway, it just took away from what was a great final. That's all. It was a ton of fun. 1-0. Messi wins, even though he's carted off in tears, basically, leaving the pitch in the first half. 2 terrific finals yesterday. I'm glad that all the fans were able to get into the stadium in Berlin, from what we know of, ones who had bought tickets, instead of those poor families who probably spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to get in the Copa America Final. And who knows, they might have traveled from South America to get there, and they were shut out because CONMEBOL couldn't get their shit together. FIFA better get it together for this World Cup, because that was embarrassing.
We are Rogue Media Sports.